This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 419, recorded on October 17th, 2019. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find them around your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios. Super beautiful Bellevue, Nebraska. Of course, we post the show, and there'll be some show notes this week. So we post those to the AverageGuy.tv, and for this one, you'll want to do the AverageGuy.tv/HGG419. You can also join us live on the mobile app. Tony was going to be out on the road, and the best way to join us on the road is through the mobile app. Go out to homegadgetgeeks.com, Android, iPhone, either way, free. You can download them. Best way to listen live and on the road. It streams through our Spreaker app, and we'd love to have you do that again, free, homegadgetgeeks.com. Join the conversation in our Discord group, theaverageguy.tv/Discord, or in our Facebook group, theaverageguy.tv/Facebook. Both seem to be moving along or humming along nicely, so if you want to join us there as well, you could do that. A quick shout out to Justin. Justin Simmons sent me some, I know I've been practicing this because I didn't want to get it wrong, but Bundaberg rum. He sent that to me from all the way from Australia. I guess it's really good Australian stuff. You might want to go to the show notes, so theaverageguy.tv/HGG419. I'll have a link to a YouTube video that's got a really funny song about just how the Australians, I think about their rum, at least this kind of rum. Anyways, it may not be the best to drink straight. You might want to cut it with something, but man, it seems like you can get messed up. So Justin, thanks for doing that. He also sent me a few cigars, and I always appreciate those. And if you want to do that, let me know. I will always smoke the cigars you send you. Ed Sullivan has joined us tonight. Speaking of that, Ed, thank you for sending Mike and I a couple cigars. I got to enjoy the one last night. Mike hasn't yet, but thanks for sending those. I appreciate it. Welcome to Home Gadget Geeks.
Is there any chance you might smoke Mike's?
Yes, there's a good chance. Yeah, there is a very, very good chance that that's going to happen. But Ed, welcome to Home Gadget Geeks. You are a podcast producer, and you also do podcasts. You're on shows. You're on the Cigar Authority, and so that's really easy to find. By the way, just Google the Cigar Authority everywhere, and you can do that. But how long have you been on that show?
So I've been producing that for 2 years. Just hit my 2-year anniversary. They've been doing the show for almost 10. So we're coming up on the 500th episode. I think we're at 498.
Weekly, it's a Saturday, right? Saturday live, is that right?
Saturday live from 12 Eastern to 2. And they have never missed a week. It has never failed to go live at noon for about the last 10 years.
That's amazing. Just with all the technical things that can go wrong, with all the people things that can go wrong, with all the stuff that has to happen. We're at 419. So, I mean, I probably missed 4 a year due to vacation, or I was sick when we had you scheduled 2 weeks ago. That almost never happens. I'm almost never sick, but
no, and with 4 people on the show, if somebody can't make it, the other people carry on.
Yeah. Very informative if you're a cigar guy or gal, and you want to kind of get a variety of what's going on in the business, who's doing what, some reviews. They smoke them live. Great show. The Cigar Authority is what it is. And Ed, how often do you think you're on that?
On it in what regard?
As far as camera, being on camera. I know you produce.
Oh, I'm never on camera.
Oh, you're on every once in a while, aren't you? Or do they just talk about you?
They talk about, I speak. I have a speaking part.
Okay.
Right? But the production board is off to the side.
So you're always there.
The disembodied voice, right? And I get to play all the sound effects and mess with the other hosts.
Yeah,
but
it's a good show.
It's fun. We have a lot of fun doing it.
And available in all podcast form. You can subscribe on YouTube. You can do all those things, right?
All the places, as they say nowadays, all Spotify, iHeart, yada, yada.
Anything else when we think about what you do, any other passion projects or things that you do or on that you want to promote?
Don't forget, I'm also on the Ash Holes.
Oh yeah.
And that is on Tuesdays now at 4 p.m. Eastern. That goes out live too. I work at the podcast studio, so all of the shows we have folks come in to do their shows. We actually stream everything live, and then post show. I just, pull the audio from that, do a little quick processing on it, and it's out the door.
Yeah, it's kind of what we do here. Very,
Yeah.
very, very similar. Get it done. A few edits, almost none, and get them out. Right.
Yeah, I think in a year and a half, 2 years counting Cigar Authority, I've done about 1,000 episodes out of there, and I think I did 3 edits. So
Yeah.
it's going out the way it came out of us.
And 419 episodes. I've maybe done 3 edits on this where people have kind of said, "Hey, I made a mistake. Can you cut that part out?" And sometimes that always hasn't been easy, but we've got it done. Ed, how long you been smoking cigars?
Let's call it about 30 years.
Okay.
So it's been a while.
Yeah. And so you've actually seen, we were talking about this in the pre-show. You've actually seen, I thought the golden age of cigars was kind of maybe the last 5 years, but you said no. They've been more popular than they are right now.
The cigar boom was, a lot of what precipitated the cigar boom was cigar aficionado kind of came on the scene. And then I think a more general audience started to become aware of it. And really, I think at that time, too, with all of the economy.com stuff going on, I think it just really got some popularity. Some sports figures, start to be seen with cigars. So it got a little bit of a cool factor to it. And at that time, it became so popular, they couldn't keep up with production, really. So
and this is like 99, 2000, 2001, that kind of era.
Yeah, but it is a resurgence now. And it's interesting if you look at it, the country of origin changes over time, right? If you go back to pre-embargo, which was what, 1962-ish, 3-ish in there.
Something like that.
It was not all, but a lot of Cuban cigars.
Yep.
And then at one time, subsequent to that, there were some from the Canary Islands, the Philippines, but then the Dominican Republic really emerged as the big one after that. But Honduras and now Nicaragua in particular is a hot area these days.
Yeah. I think I've heard that Nicaragua, their number one export overall is tobacco to the United States. That's by far their number one.
I would think that's probably the case.
Yeah.
I think they may have reached the top of the food chain in number of exports. So,
well, in popularity too. I mean, I think as I look at some of the cigar, I get cigar magazines now, and I look through those. A lot of tobacco coming out of Nicaragua, and country. It's stabilized the country in a lot of ways. Of course, money does some amazing things. Not always the countries, but when the money's good, life is a little bit better. And Nicaragua has not always been the most stable country, but in the years that the exports have been good, it's not. What's interesting on the tech side, cigar making hasn't changed, right? In 200 years, right?
I would say it's in that regard, it's a lot like wine, right? Has it changed? Not really. There have been refinements, right? They're not necessarily aging it in wooden casks anymore, and cigars are similar. They used to be all hand-carved wooden molds, right? But now they've gone to plastic molds, right? And the factories have become much more sanitary. You see stainless steel rolling tables. So it's definitely improved, but the actual process, it's a handmade product.
Yeah. Still gathered by hand, still rolled by hand, still binded by hand, still pressed into the mold by hand.
Yep.
Oftentimes gravity is what holds the box. They just stack them up and right.
Harvested by hand. So.
Yeah. Yeah, even and I think I've been watching some videos on it over the last couple months because I don't do anything. Once I get into something, I go I go all the way in. So the different cuttings and how they keep track of the different cuttings of the leaves, kind of based where they're found on the plant,
Right.
in the, the Connecticut versus the non, as far as the wrappers and the colors of those, right? I mean, so but that's not doesn't take a lot of tech, right? That's still kind of old world, right?
So it is still kind of old world, but if you look even at technology advancements in agriculture, there have certainly been some. The farming techniques have improved significantly, right? So, in terms of things like soil analysis, if you look at a company like Perdomo, I mean, he's made his own equipment for certain things,
Mm,
right? So,
mm, mm.
even with the seeds he's planting, they'll look at those under a microscope, right? To see,
Wow.
okay,
Yeah.
are there any imperfections in the seed, right? Because once it's in the ground, it's out of your hands for a while. Then they'll do a lot with soil analysis to make sure that the soil is consistent from crop to crop. Irrigation has changed, obviously. So a lot of it is in farming technique.
Yeah.
The other thing is, back in the cigar boom, boy, you might find 20 to 30% of them didn't draw well. And they were making them fast, and now they've got draw testing machines in most of the factories. So you do tend to get a more consistent product these days.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was watching a video, and it's just really just a tube. They put that
Yep.
in, and it's got a little meter on it, and it just tests the draw, and they're just running those through by hand, kind of,
Yeah.
throwing them in. I do imagine with this current boom, and I think it's going to continue to get more popular.
Yeah.
Again, boom means more money, more profits. You had mentioned these cigar companies are still, a lot of them, family owned,
Sure.
right? And so still small families in these countries that are running it. Do you think are we in a spot maybe where corporate is like they did with beer? I mean, American beer, this craft beer movement took over, and then now we're having the bigger breweries starting to buy, right, all the craft beer.
Right.
Could something happen like that in with
Well,
cigars?
if you look at a company out of Honduras from the original boom, a company called Camacho, at some point, Davidoff, which is a much bigger company, came in and bought them out. So, there is some consolidation happening, and some of the bigger companies like Altadis, and some of them have, let's say, ties to more of the cigarette industry,
Yeah,
and they've sort of diversified
right.
into cigars. I think the positive note on that front is they're finding there's not enough money in it for them.
It's a hard thing to manufacture, right? Labor
Yep.
intensive to put these together, right? This is
Sure. I
not a
mean, they're used to cranking out cigarettes and, vape product.
yeah,
Well, this is all handmade.
right. Yeah. But I think more passionate consumers, don't you think? I mean, one of the things, you don't have somebody, most people aren't smoking 5 or 6 cigars a day like they would cigarettes, where you might be smoking, people may smoke an entire pack in a day easily in some cases. But it seems like the people doing it, they're more passionate, they're more educated about it, and they're
Yeah.
maybe willing to spend a little bit more, don't you think?
Oh, I think so. And if you look at the manufacturers, a lot of them have been doing it in their families for generations.
Yeah.
And, the next generation will take over. And, the point about cigars is it's really not the same addictive quality as cigarettes. What I say to people is, did you ever see somebody run off an airplane to light a cigar? It really is not the same thing at
Yeah.
all. People tend to smoke fewer of them. They don't inhale them. And it's really an event, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to actually sit, I'm going to relax, I'm going to have a nice cigar. So it's very different from other tobacco products.
Yeah. Kind of a celebration. I mean, there's often tied around celebrations or special events. And you're right. Now, this week has been an exception for me. My Marine son was home, and I
But that
wanted,
is a special
yeah,
event.
yeah, yeah.
And, I think the other thing about cigar smoking is it tends to be a very social event,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I know, Jim, you've been going to some cigar lounges or
Hmm.
people talk to each other.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
not, it's a situation where I think it's more social.
Yeah.
And what I love about cigar lounges is sort of the great equalizer, right? You'll have the FedEx man sitting there with a blue collar guy with the CEO of a company, and
Mhm.
everybody's just having a conversation, relaxing, and enjoying their cigars.
Yeah. And I've kind of noticed as I've been perusing YouTube through the videos, there is kind of a movement amongst at least the YouTubers that I'm watching of, hey, let's not get hung up in what's right and wrong. Let's do what we enjoy. So if you enjoy doing it, do it that way. Do you sense that as well?
Oh, absolutely. And I've said that for a long people get obsessive about it, right? Well, you're not cutting it right and this humidity's not. Well, why don't you let everybody just enjoy their cigars,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
so there are certain things, as a new cigar smoker, you kind of really need to figure out how to cut it properly.
Yeah.
If you cut too much off, then the cigar can unravel on you if you cut past the cap of the cigar. If the cigar is over humidified or not kept at the right temperature, then you enter a danger zone. If you go too high on the humidity, the cigars will get mold on them. And at that point, throw them in the trash. I don't know about you, Jim, but I don't want to smoke mold. um, you know, the one people are less aware of is the temperature danger, right? So somewhere around even 72 degrees and 72 plus percent humidity, tobacco beetles can hatch.
Mm-hmm.
And they're nice little boring creatures, not boring as in dull, but they'll bore right through the wrapper leaf, even right through cellophane.
Mm.
So if you're not careful, you can get an infestation in your whole humidor.
Mm.
And, some people have hundreds or thousands of dollars worth of
Mm-hmm.
cigars. So
Mm-hmm.
temperature becomes important as well. So, for most folks, you want to find the coolest spot in your house to put your humidor.
Yeah.
If you're really in a high temperature area without air conditioning, you've got to make accommodations to control temperature. And fortunately, there's more products these days for that.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about those here in just a second. I want to let's start with some basics because I think sometimes when people think cigars, they think of big box humidors, or they think about like their dad, something their dad had or their grandfather had, and I've really kind of taken on to the new movement of kind of acrylic in a lot of ways, and you can see I've got a hemostat there that's telling me temperature and I think ooh, this is 76. I got a little
Ooh.
warm because it's sitting on my desk and I think the heat from my
Yeah.
computers is I'll move this back into a cooler zone when we're done here. But good to know, like, hey, 76, 69%. I got this acrylic. I went to Walmart and bought just a clear acrylic, $6 uh waterproof, airproof,
Yeah.
right? So you can seal them in. I mean, is this okay, Ed? Can I get away with kind of starting my cigars this way?
Absolutely. People will call those a tupperware,
Yeah.
Tupperware humidor.
Yeah.
Uh, the only thing to be aware of, and it's not a problem for most folks, is it is airtight, whereas a wooden humidor really isn't, right? So cigars are still aging and fermenting, even, once they're in the consumer's hands. So some folks will say you actually need to burp your tupperware now and then. So, and it happens naturally if you're smoking anyway. You're going to open it to take a cigar
Yeah.
out, but
Yeah.
a little bit of air exchange is certainly helpful.
That's good. That's good to know. These just pop open like this, and then you can hear the seal. And man, oh, it smells so good. I got to put it back on.
Yeah, and the thing for folks to be aware of though is then it becomes important to control the humidity, right? And have something that can actually absorb as well as add humidity to the air because especially in an airtight, if you don't have the right product, you're going to over humidify those cigars.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is that right product. So I've noticed the Bovida. I,
Bovida's a very
that's
popular
it. There you go.
product, and
Right there.
there you
And
have it.
I've got the 69, 69 percent
And
humidity.
and they
Is
do
that
a great job, right?
they do? And let me just so for those who don't know, the Bovida product, it's a packet. It's got some kind of substance inside. It looks like a paper bag, a small paper bag of sort, and it's got some gel or something in there that both adds and removes humidity based on the spec that's on it, right? So if it's
Yeah.
too humid, it'll pull it in. If it's not humid enough, it'll put it out. Pretty ingenious, especially if you're in a tupperware. I know it's keeping it consistent because I have, and you've got one of these too. You were
I
showing me
do.
earlier.
I have
We
it
have a remote,
right here. Normally it's in the humidor, but
yeah, remote temperature in humidity sensor that sits in there. I think I paid maybe 20, $22,
yeah,
$25 for.
they're relatively inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
This particular product isn't necessarily designed for humidors, but it works perfectly fine. I
Yeah,
think they sell it more as put it in your greenhouse or something,
yeah,
but
works out pretty well though. Sits right in there. Actually goes to my. I have a Android tablet that I
oh.
actually run the software on. It sits on. It's telling me too. It's at 77 degrees. I need to get these to cooler.
It's yeah, I mean it's a relatively rudimentary app, but it does what you need it to do.
Yeah.
I think
No.
you can set alerts if it goes below a certain range or above a certain range. So, I keep it in the humidor, but that's sort of my general house temperature alert too.
Yeah.
If it goes below about 50 degrees, I know I got big problems.
Well, yeah, no, for sure. And we're in this weird spot now in the fall where it's not cold enough for the heat to kick on,
Yeah.
but it's the house is um, insulated well enough that it stays pretty warm. It won't, the air conditioner won't come on. And so we get kind of a little bit, a few degrees warmer, even in the winter.
Yeah.
We get a few degrees warmer in here. So I need to, this is probably the time of year, this is the first fall that I've had a humidor working. And it's probably one of those things because of those beetles,
Right.
probably need to be careful. How long would it need to be at, let's say, close to 80 degrees for those things to emerge? Is there a
Ah,
time?
it might be within a week or so,
Okay.
but and it's not a guarantee, right? Some
Yeah.
of the manufacturers now deep freeze their cigars, and then you will not have a problem with beetles if you do that. The obsessive consumers sometimes will also freeze everything that comes into their house,
Okay.
but I don't know.
That doesn't hurt. That doesn't hurt the cigar. Doesn't.
No, if you
Okay.
do a search, there's a whole process, right? So you got to get it in an airtight bag, refrigerate for a little while first to let them start to adapt to it, and then into the freezer for, I think it's 72 hours, but a quick online search will yield
Okay.
that. But I've never bothered.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
You
haven't,
know,
in the year or two I've been doing this, I've never had. I know it's a legend thing. A lot of guys and ladies talk about,
it,
you don't want to get those,
well, you don't. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really bad if it happens,
Yeah.
but
Not the end of the world.
listen,
Unless you have thousands of dollars worth of
you're right.
cigars, right?
I've been smoking
Yeah.
cigars for 30 years, never froze a single one, never had a single beetle.
Okay.
So,
Okay. But so it's the one of the things that freaks people out.
yeah.
And so I think good to know. If I was in a space, Ed, where say I'm in a really, really dry Arizona and it just doesn't get the house doesn't necessarily cool down to that optimum temperature. It's not, I don't want to throw them in the fridge, right? This isn't one of those
No.
kinds of things, right? Because the humidity will drop pretty
Oh,
severely at that point,
yeah.
right?
It's very dry in the fridge. So you definitely never want them in there.
What about a wine? If I had a wine fridge, which isn't
Well,
quite as cold, can that something like that work?
so, as it turns out, some companies are actually marketing their wine fridges.
If you and we can screen share here if you want to show something, we can do that. You don't have to, but
Eh, I'll describe it
yeah,
beautifully.
yeah, yeah.
There's a company called New Air that really started out making wine coolers. These are thermoelectric, right? So they don't have a compressor, which is part of what, with frost-free
Hmm.
refrigerators and all of
Hmm.
that, that's part of what draws the humidity out of the space. So these will not draw the humidity out. And you can set the temperature where you want it, right? So you could set it at, 68 degrees. Now you still have to deal with, okay, how am I going to humidify this? And there's, lots of solutions for that. Some people, for something of that size, wine fridge size,
What
yeah,
about I bought some of these gel pack? Ooh, they need to be. I need to add some water to them. But these dry mistat, I think is the way it's pronounced.
yeah,
You
and
you like these at all? That you can
they
throw in?
they work well.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with a big space, they actually sell separately humidification beads, which are basically what's inside of there.
Hmm.
And, a lot of folks will just take a pound of those and throw them in a Tupperware container and add some distilled water to it.
Yeah, and I think that's important that you use distilled
It
in
is.
these, right? You don't want to add any additional. But I've thrown them in, so the acrylic round gets them, and then I've got Bovita packs
Yeah, and
also in here.
they're great for it just because they're shaped like a cigar, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's not taking up any extra space.
yeah. It just sits nicely with the cigars.
Yep.
And this one's a little empty. I've been smoking a few of them, so this one I usually keep this very full.
Yeah, which is another point, right? It works better if you have it, 2/3 full, right? So the cigars themselves, then once they reach the proper humidity level, are basically serving as other humidification units, right? So
Yeah,
same thing as a refrigerator, right? If you have a case of cold cans in there and you put one in, a new one, it's going to get colder than putting it into an empty fridge. It'll get colder faster. So
yeah.
then
So a good reason to keep them. I'm half. So it's time to make
half is okay.
it's
But
time to
yeah,
make an order.
buy
No,
some
don't tell me
cigars.
that. I need
You're worth it, Jim.
I need to make an order.
But
And Ed, is there a difference when we think about buying them? Is there a difference between buying online and buying locally from price wise for sure, but is there a difference?
you know, couple points on that.
Yeah.
Somebody will say, well, I paid this much for a cigar, and somebody else will say, you got ripped off. Well, not necessarily. It depends on where you bought it, right? Because every state has their own tobacco tax. And in fact, most of them are specific to cigars, right? So I work in New Hampshire, zero cigar tax, zero sales tax, right? And then if you drive a mile down the road, Massachusetts has a 40% tax on cigars, plus I don't know where we're at, like six and a quarter on the sales tax on top
Hmm.
of the 40, so
Hmm.
it's a compounding tax.
Yeah.
Now, on the internet, it's become somewhat interesting, right? Because most big operations now are going to charge you whatever the sales tax is of your local municipality. But there are a couple of states who have legislation pending. I think one will go into effect where they're also going to require the internet shippers to collect the cigar tax. So before long, at some point, the bargains may end on the internet.
So maybe a good time
To
to
stock
stock
up.
up on
Yeah.
that. I've been for whatever reason I've been a Thompson cigar purchaser. That's just where I've chose.
Yeah.
I think them and cigars.com or something are very similar or the same companies. Is there and they've been very fair. I get pretty good. I'm a Drew Estates fan and I like
Yeah.
those. They're infused and flavored and some of those other things. It's what I enjoy. They're I can get them from $2 to $4 a stick, which I buy when you buy them, and if you buy them in bulk, you get free shipping and all those other kinds of
Yeah.
things. Is that okay? Is there better places to do it, or if I was
You
going to do
know,
it online?
yeah, what I would recommend to everyone as a start. Now, this doesn't work for everyone. You may not have a local cigar retailer, right? But to get you educated and try some things, right? You could go buy one single cigar. Well,
Hmm.
that's not very cost effective on the internet, although a lot of them offer sampler packs,
Yeah.
and really that's the best way to start, right? Try a few different things because they're all different in terms of flavor and strength. But if you can find a good local tobacco retailer, and I understand if you're in a high tax state, well, that may not be financially feasible to keep buying from them. But,
Hmm.
as far as online goes, there's a whole bunch of good companies out there. Uh, big ones. Cigars International is big,
Yep.
but
Yeah.
I think they own Thompson's now.
And maybe that's what I was thinking. Cigar International. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of consolidation in that space.
Sure. And the price has been, at least for me, and because I love sharing them, one of the things I've done is, I buy a bunch and then over time share them with friends. And it's given
Yep.
me a great opportunity to try different flavors, different things. I've also noticed what you're drinking with them can make a big difference as well, right?
Huge difference.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of good pairings. The rum works well if you think about it. That's probably the predominant alcohol product in the countries where they manufacture cigars.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it certainly is a pairing that happens quite a bit for me. I'm also a cigar taste tester for Cigar Journal magazine. And yeah, when you're doing that, you get water.
Mm.
That's about it,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you really have to focus on the
On the
flavor
flavor.
of the cigar.
Yeah,
But
which would kind of bum me out. I've kind of enjoyed the pairing.
yep.
We actually had a really, we kind of had a dry red the other night we were drinking, and I kind of looked for a cigar that I thought wouldn't be too sweet, but necessarily wouldn't have a lot of bite to it either. I've got some that have, they're kind of just nasty, and you kind of want something rough with them, right? And it's
Yep.
so for me, and I think back to our beginning, I think for everybody this is different of kind of finding that sweet spot of like, what do you pair with what? Because I do think they just go really, really well together.
Yeah, and especially for something like a wine, you can't get a cigar that's going to completely overpower it, right?
Yeah.
So, you may go to something lighter to pair with a wine, and you could go with something much more full bodied if you're going to drink a bourbon or a cognac or something
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah, well, and some of the sweet cigars, I've even had a Riesling with.
Oh, yeah.
It's been delightful, and so it's one of those. I've spent some time now thinking through the pairings, like, oh, this would really go with this, or for I'm a big Java fan, and so a Java
Mm.
latte, which is a pretty light cigar for
Oh,
folks that are
of
trying to.
course, you could have that with coffee,
Yeah,
right?
no, right on. And we were the other day, we were at Havana Garage, our local
Yep.
establishment here in Omaha. And the gal, Sarah came with me. She wasn't smoking cigars, but she came just to enjoy the time. And she was like, "Hey, do you guys have an Irish coffee?" And typically we
Mm.
make those with just Bailey's. And the gal said, "Do you want Jameson in there as well?" And we're like, "You
Oh.
can do that?" And so I have not been doing coffee a lot, but that seems to me that I think that's what I'm gonna try the next couple is
Yep.
Irish coffee with one of those cigars that has a light, that might be a lighter. So I've used the internet to kind of inexpensively
Yep.
try some things out. So that's okay. I mean, so for most people, if they wanted to try something, go into a local store if you can, but you could get
Sure.
on the internet and buy a package. I see at Thompson's, I see sample packs for $30 that give
Right.
you 5 or 6 or 7 cigars to try,
Yeah.
right?
And then you get a good variety, and once you've zeroed in, I mean, part of the reason I do like local cigar shops is they get to know you and they get to know what you like, right? So something new comes in that's, in your flavor profile, they'll say, "Hey, this might be one you want to check out." And internet is just sort of I don't know. I'll try that and
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
But again, once you find something you really like, then you can buy in quantity. Most places offer a box discount, so it's cheaper by the box than it will be for single cigars. But now we're starting to get into more storage space.
Yeah, more humidification, more,
Right.
more division. Hey, in speaking of that, in my humidors, I don't have any cedar anywhere in these. Am I doing it wrong? Because I've always been told you got to have some Spanish cedar, or it's not a real humidor. Is that true?
I don't know if it's true. It certainly doesn't hurt anything, right? So,
Yeah.
if you age something a long time in contact with Spanish cedar, which, by the way, is not cedar at all, it's in the mahogany family, don't put aromatic cedar near your cigars. But if you age, the one I sent you, for example, is aged in the Byron.
Ed, I cannot thank you enough for this cigar. Like, okay, let's just, is it okay if I disclose the price on this?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So we looked them up, and I'm kind of used to smoking online cigars that are $4 or $5. Like, a big cigar for me is 10. This was 30. And you were very, very generous to
Well,
send us two. And so I
I
appreciate
was worried about your further education, so I thought I'd take you all the way to the PhD level.
okay, so you told me that, and I'm not sure I necessarily believed you the whole way.
Right.
But then I took this out last night because I couldn't have you on the show and not have at least tasted it, right? So V cut it because that's
Yep.
for me, that's what I like. Most of the cigars V cut. If it's a boxed,
Right.
if it's square and boxed, I'll punch it. And I've kind of gotten away from full cuts. Just
Yeah.
just my preference. It's what I like. But started on this a little peppery to begin with, which I think most cigars are, right out of the
Yep.
chute. And then it settled into the most mild, smooth, delightful, delicious.
And you do catch a lot of cedar on that, in the background.
Yeah. It was so I said to Sarah, you gotta try this. Like, so she tried it. She's like, oh my gosh, that is legit. And so there is a big difference. Like, this is a celebration cigar, hearty, good size, not Churchill size, but
Nope.
a good, good length, good
Yeah,
girth
I
on
think
this one.
that's probably a 52 or 54 ring gauge.
54. Yep.
And
54.
ring gauge, for whatever odd reason, is the number of 64ths of an inch. So a 64 ring gauge would be 1 inch across.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
it's delightful. So again, thank you for
I'm
doing this.
glad you enjoyed it.
This was the Reserva 5 Anos. Am I pronouncing that right?
Cinco años.
Cinco Anos. There we go.
Come on now.
Sorry, my Spanish is
Although that one, that one, well, you've listened to the Cigar Authority and the way some of the folks butcher
yes.
the English language, never mind the Spanish language. But yeah, that one is interesting in that it is manufactured in Costa Rica.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a few small factories in Costa Rica. And, in the old days of cigars, you could say, okay, I'm going to smoke a Nicaraguan cigar. Sure, because they grew all the tobacco in Nicaragua and then they manufactured it there. Now there's a lot more blending going on. So you may have, 4 or 5 countries worth of uh, tobacco of origin from 4 or 5 different countries that they'll blend.
Mm-hmm.
So things have become more interesting and more complex in some of the tastes.
I have also, and let's talk about lighter tech for just a second. So we talked a little bit about cutters. Hey, does it matter before we move off the cut, right? So I said V cut.
Yep.
You can straight cut it. You can
Yep.
punch it, right? Those are kind of the 3 most common ways of doing it. You have a preference on what you do? And do cutters matter? I have a cheap little $6 V cutter that does the job. Do I need a $30 V cutter?
So, as with anything else in this world, I mean, you get what you pay for, right? The cheap cutters are as sharp as can be for not a long time. Right. So as as soon as you start to feel any resistance, because over time as they get duller, they'll tear the wrapper a little bit.
Yeah.
V cutters, uh, Calibri, is it the Calibri? Yeah, they make the best V cut, and I say that because it stays sharp virtually forever,
Okay.
and it's a very deep V cut. A lot of the times the cheap ones are just kind of skimming the surface.
It gets pretty small. I mean, it's a small
Yeah.
cut across the top when I do it. I would just get more of a draw the deeper it is.
Yeah, a little bit more, but the reality is, I don't know, it's whatever people like.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of the punch cut just because it's a very small opening.
Hmm.
And if it's a big cigar, over time, you'll get a little buildup, of
Yeah.
tars and particulates in that small opening. But if you're enjoying it, who cares?
Yeah. Well, we punch cut the smaller. So the
Yep.
Java brand that I was talking about, those are a lot smaller, a lot shorter.
Yep.
That seems to work well for those. The lighter I have has a punch cutter on the lighter itself.
Yep. They're usually fairly small
Yeah,
diameter.
this one
Yeah.
not very big at all, but we it's in a pinch, kind of comes in. I seen some people chew off the
And
end if they
yeah, the old timers still bite the end off.
well, cigars were made a little bit different too for the old timers, where the torpedo ends were a little more common, and so you would bite that tip off, right?
Yep. And yeah, they used to make a lot more perfecto shapes, so shaped cigars rather than what they call parejos, which are, straight sided. So,
Yeah.
but, the important thing is cut it. You can't smoke it till you cut it unless you got a cheap machine made.
You don't say that too loud because Justin is trying to get me to smoke this thing right now
Oh,
in the chat room. So I have to be careful there. So it can from a cutter standpoint,
yeah.
I've noticed cutters, the cheap ones are a few dollars to the more expensive, which medium would be in the $30 range, where the more expensive
Yeah.
ones maybe
And
60, $65.
at some point, they go crazy and they become more decorative collectibles, which then people,
Yeah.
put them on a shelf and don't really use them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I left mine outside. Didn't know it the other night. I was looking for we were going to go out and smoke, and was looking for the cutter. I'm like, well, I must have left it in a pair of pants or something.
Yeah.
It'll come up. It'll show up. So we get out there and we start, and then one of my kids goes, "Oh, Dad, there's your cutter," and I had left it on the rail of the fence. It's dark up there, and I didn't see it. Well, okay, I left that cutter out overnight. Not such a big deal.
There is that, if you invest money,
Yeah.
you are likely to leave it somewhere. So, if you're the kind of person who loses things, yeah, just keep buying $6 disposable cutters.
Well, and I've also learned, like as I go to Havana, I kind of take cutters and lighters with me.
Yep.
Sometimes they Havana's crazy about this. Sometimes they're out of lighters or they're all around. It's like, I'm just going to take my own with me. I went on to Amazon and picked up some inexpensive lighters, and
Yep.
I've seen some guys go crazy over these things. This is really just a one flame jet, so it's a jet flame butane on the bottom, or not? It's butane, right? Butane on the bottom, easy to fill. Gets me, I don't know, 3 or 4 evenings with multiple people using them, which is pretty good. Some guys like the flame, some like both.
Soft flame.
Yeah, well, yeah, soft flame, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have an opinion, or is there, as we think about lighters, do I need to get one? Because I've seen them where they turn on the jet and then you can flip them over to a soft flame for the actual draw. Any opinion on that?
I think for cigars, I mean, really, the jet flame lighters were designed for cigars.
Okay.
Right. I mean, people obviously use soft flames before there were jet flames, but with a good jet lighter, you can hold it somewhat away from the end of the cigar and toast it a little bit before you go to light it. And the important thing is just make sure that it's evenly lit to start, right? You don't want to start off on the wrong foot and then not have a good burn on that cigar. But it's interesting, I look at it a lot like the razor blades, right? Originally there was one jet, then there were two,
Yeah.
then three, and then four,
Yeah.
And I think the most popular ones now are the three jet lighters.
Yeah. And I think that's what this is. I
Yep.
got them I got it as a deal on Amazon, $20. They were 20 for 2, but they sent me 4 by mistake. So I've been given, I gave one away to one of my kids.
Yep.
I said, keep this it's where we play poker. Keep this in the garage. So we always have one that's there. I've got another one just in case. Good.
So now the important thing on the refill is to make sure you bleed the lighter.
Okay.
So,
and that just means run it all the way out.
You don't necessarily have to, because what you can do is,
I see what you mean.
you turn it upside down and let the propellant out of there, right? Because over time you won't be able to refill it completely, right? Because you've still got all the propellant in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so after a while, people say, okay, my lighter doesn't work anymore. And they bring them into the store.
Turning it upside down and turning it on and
no, turn it upside down, and they actually make a bleed tool, right? So what you're trying to do is on the little nipple underneath, and you could use the tip of a pen, or I've used a toothpick.
Okay.
Right, just to press that, and when it's upside down, it's really going to be the propellant that's coming out of it, and you'll know if there's actual butane coming out, because you can feel how cold it is coming out of there, and then that'll let you get a full refill on it.
Yeah, these have been good and easy to refill. Clear on the side, so you can kind of see the fluid in there. And if I hold it up to light, it's really easy to see, and so I can kind of see where I'm at with that. In getting that done.
Yeah, let me grab my daily stuff off the desk.
Yeah. No, right on. Joe in the chat room, while you're doing that, Joe in the chat room says Zippos are just so cool. And of course, when I was in the military, the guys that did smoke always had Zippo lighters. That sound, that kind of patented sound as you flip that open. Of course, that's a soft foam. You get out of a Zippo, or at least an old school Zippo.
Yeah, and I have more expensive stuff than this. I just don't use it anymore. For a cutter, I use a straight cut. This particular one is made by Lotus, and it's actually called the Lotus Jaws cutter. There's a little bit of a serration on each of the blades. I think those retail for about $30. And this is very similar to what you're using, Jim. It's really...
Yeah, I think those have become the most popular, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And, I think at the store where the studio is, they're about $10.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is the Colibri V cutter. So it's hard to see here, but if you can see the blade and where you put the cigar in, you're going to get a much deeper cut with that V than you will on the cheaper plastic cutters.
And again, that's kind of personal preference, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. If you're getting a good draw on the cigar, that's what's important.
Yeah. And I think it just takes practice. You got to kind of figure out what you do. You had mentioned this early at the top of the show. I think one of the things I've enjoyed most about it is the social aspect of it. Like, I don't want to go on my deck and do it alone. Like, I'm not interested in. It's not a single player sport, right? I mean, I want to be out there with somebody.
Yeah, people relax, and they tend to, especially us men folk who don't talk to each other, tend to relax. And, I find I have better conversations with people when we're sitting and smoking a cigar.
Yeah.
So let's hit a couple things on humidity, Jim.
Yeah, 70-70. Do I have to have 70-70?
No.
70 degrees, 70% humidity. And I was sure gunning for that for a long time when I first.
Well, and you see all kinds of stuff. The ideal 70/70. That was kind of, I don't quite want to go with propaganda, but that was put out in marketing literature. I think there was a product originally called 70/70. And as luck would have it, if you mix propylene glycol 50/50 with distilled water, it has the property of maintaining 70% relative humidity at 70 degrees. Okay. So 70/70 is safe, right? You're not going to get mold and you're not going to get any tobacco beetles. Does that mean it's the right humidity for that cigar? I think not. You know, I've got active humidification and mine's dialed in. I was going to check it, but I have all of them out right now.
Yeah,
You know,
that's right.
last time I checked, I was running at about 64%.
A little lower, a little lower.
Yeah. And really what that'll do is I find they burn a little bit better,
Okay.
you know, a little bit drier. Some folks will keep them at 70% and then even dry box them for a day or two. Take them out of the humidor.
Yeah.
you
And
know.
I kind of keep mine that 68, 69, and then
And that's perfectly fine.
yeah, it works. Then I'll throw them in a bag. So I have a little Ziploc bag that when I go to Havana, lets us bring our own. So you just
Yeah.
buy the drinks and they let you smoke your own.
Yeah. And,
Or you can
you
buy.
know, in a Ziploc bag, they're actually going to keep fine
Yeah.
for a week,
Oh,
maybe more.
okay.
You know, I mean, without even throwing a bovida in there.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, because especially if you're keeping them at 70, okay, you lose 5% humidity in a week. Guess what? It might smoke better. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It might. So this one's sitting out. It's kind of bothering me that it's sitting out right now because I want.
it's not harming it.
No, I know it's not, but it's what I don't, when I do things, I go crazy. Like
Oh, yeah.
I am not normal about these things. And
Yeah,
so
well,
get this back in the humidor.
yeah, in fact, in the studio, I probably have some stashed away with no humidification. And
Yeah.
I might smoke them 2 weeks after. I mean, no harm, no foul. Is it optimal? No. Do I enjoy it? Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any tricks? You said you had a bunch of different humidify or ways of measuring. Or are those different measuring devices you have to measure your humidity that you have out there?
Yeah, I mean, I've got the one you have, which is Bluetooth, and that's made by a company called Govee.
Yep.
Probably a Chinese company. I didn't really research it. Then they also make one that's Wi-Fi. And for whatever reason, the part that measures the humidity tends to be a whole lot bigger. Maybe because they actually want to put AAA batteries in here and make it more replaceable. But when you buy that, it comes with a unit you just plug right into an outlet that actually handles the Wi-Fi. And then I'm not 100% sure whether it communicates Bluetooth back to this device or it's some other proprietary communication. But
Z-Wave or Zigbee, one of those.
yeah. So it works well. You know, same app, right? It's just the Wi-Fi unit, and so I can, when I'm at work, make sure my cigars are safe. Although, you know, if you stop to think about it, does that matter at all? Not really. You know, I mean,
It's kind of fun though. Let's every once in a while, like, hey, what temperature are they at? Oh, they're okay.
it is fun, but you know how it is with that stuff. You just sort of get obsessed about it, and then one day you realize, yeah, I don't think it matters.
Yeah. No.
You know, it's let's call it the same trajectory as the Fitbit for most people. You become absolutely obsessed, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. For a while, for a time.
Yeah.
And
And then you kind of get,
a bit longer.
yeah, you reach a state of equilibrium at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so for this, you know, I think make sure that when you're connecting it, I put it on my locked down guest Wi-Fi network because you are giving it the password.
Yeah.
to a Chinese company.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, you are kind of opening up your network a little bit.
Do you deploy any other tech to kind of help you enjoy this habit?
No, you know, it really, like you say, it's not a big technology thing,
Yeah.
right? This is kind of traditional old school stuff.
Sort
And
of, right? I mean, when we talked about the farming industry for tobacco,
yeah, it's changing.
that's changing, but I think also the way we store them is changing in some ways too, and the devices we use and the different, just the different kind of humidifiers or the different kind
Well,
of humidors that
yeah,
are
if we want to go back to the antique humidors, those were mostly wood, but actually a lot of clay and ceramic jars as well. And, you know, so what's old is new again, just an acrylic jar now.
these come in a you can buy them in a ceramic jar, right?
They're beautiful jars. You know, they're starting to move away from that. Guess what? They weigh a lot and they don't ship well.
Yeah.
You know, they're beautiful, but they for those now they come in a very nice box that has a built-in humidification unit. So even when you're done with the cigars, you essentially have a humidor that you can use.
That's an $800 box, though.
Yeah, it's not not cheap. Although we did have one guy when the guy who manufactures the cigars, a guy named Nelson Alfonso, he was in the store for an event, and one guy bought 8 boxes that day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, when you have that kind of money and, you don't really care that
You might as well smoke what you like, right?
no, right on. I listen, I went 25 in a box. Uh,
Yeah, those are 25s.
so, 200. No, okay.
Yeah.
That'd be fun to have friends over and say,
Here, everybody have one,
"This
you
might
know.
be one of the best cigars you're ever gonna smoke," right?
Yeah.
How would you say you've smoked Cubans, so
Oh, many.
how do you think this compares? There's this myth around Cubans, right? Everybody's like, "Oh, it's a Cuban." Is it real now, or has Nicaragua and Costa Rica and everybody else caught up?
Everybody else has surpassed them.
Okay.
You know, I was in Cuba 2000 ish, right around almost 20 years ago, and I've heard from people who have been recently. It hasn't really changed.
Right.
They haven't really upgraded anything, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they had a real problem with their wrapper leaf at one point, a problem with blue mold.
Mm.
So they actually started experimenting with hybrids, and this is Corojo is the variety of wrapper, and it's never been as good again.
Mm.
You know, I would say in the late 90s, early 2000s, I don't know, conservatively, I smoked thousands of Cuban cigars, and they're very different today. The other thing is, they are still made with single origin tobacco. It's all Cuban. So you get more interesting things happening when, you know, let me take a wrapper from Ecuador, a binder from the United States, and filler from Nicaragua. You know,
Yeah.
it's a whole different world of blending.
Yeah. Well, it's become the craft beer, I think, of cigars, right?
Absolutely. And there's a company called Roma Craft, and that's their big thing that they are a craft company.
Yeah. Well, and there's craft or boutique cigar companies now too,
There
right?
are.
They're
There are. There's a whole boutique thing that goes on. And,
yeah.
you know, it's really cigars have a strong parallel to wine, right? Because there's people who say, well, is French wine the best? Well, it's good. Is it the best? That's kind of up to you to decide, right? California makes some pretty good stuff nowadays. And much like what happened with, you know, people taking cuttings really from France, right? Same thing, same variety, and you plant it in California, guess what? You don't get the same wine. And so almost all of the seed is Cuban seed. It was smuggled out of Cuba and then grown in places like Nicaragua, but Now you're dealing with soil differences and climate differences. And Nicaragua is interesting in that they have a lot of different soil types. They've got some very volcanic soil, and then they have microclimates. So you could grow the same thing in different places in Nicaragua and get a different result. And, Connecticut was a big cigar tobacco production site. A lot of that has gone the way of development, shopping malls and the like. And it's difficult too because you can't compete on labor cost with Nicaragua and those cheaper companies. For a long time, Connecticut had two big things: Connecticut broadleaf, used for wrapper, and Connecticut shade, right? That's the light one. Then, oh, a while back, they kind of figured out, and the shade is interesting if you've ever seen it grown. They basically put cheesecloth tents over it, to shade the tobacco. Then I think a genius figured out, it's kind of cloudy in Ecuador. And so really they are growing, they took the seeds and they're growing Connecticut shade in Ecuador. Almost all of the Connecticut shade cigars today are made with Ecuadorian wrapper. So
Well, in the U.S., I mean, Justin was mentioning Australia, where he lives. They've gotten pretty aggressive about really putting the clamps down on cigars.
Australia is one of the toughest places on the planet now to be a cigar smoker.
And there's some in the U.S. it's easier, but we have gone through and we continue to go through a pretty strong anti-tobacco lobby
And
here in the
yeah, I mean, the cigar industry has taken a big hit in recent years because of vape, right?
Sure,
So,
sure.
so everyone wants to regulate vape. Well, unfortunately, and this is a fairly recent thing within the last 5 years, the FDA decided they need to regulate cigars in the same way that they regulate cigarettes. So what that means on the cigarette side is you can't put new product out without going through FDA testing, which costs many hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, guess what? We're not, if you're in the cigar business, you're making small quantities of, a handmade product. You're not, manufacturing, you're hand making these things. So it may become impossible, depending on which way the FDA goes, to introduce new cigar products.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a shame.
Well, it's always a lobby, and it's one of those things we're going to fight. If you're in Australia, we feel for you, but there's always, I mean, it is one of those things, and it's
Yeah.
always been. It's just a part of getting around things. I think a lot
And
of Americans wish they could get more Cubans, of course,
yeah,
harder, and
well,
that's
because you can't get them. It's the forbidden fruit,
it
right?
is. Yeah, yeah.
And I think in Australia, they've gone to generic packaging.
Okay.
And that's also a shame because if you've seen some of the boxes, I mean, there's cigar art, really beautiful packaging. I mean, if you look at the band on that Byron, and there's a lot going on. I mean, somebody spent a lot of time in design on that. They've got raised gold. So a lot of the designs are very elaborate, and that's part of the tradition.
Yeah, it's a beautiful product, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's a beautiful product and a beautiful experience. I do. It is one of those things. Okay, so let me say this here at the end of the program as we think about this. I am in no way. I've had some folks say to me, Jim, why are you encouraging? I was a runner for a lot of years, and in fact, for the last 10 years,
Yeah, I
5
was a
marathons, did a
big
lot of fitness.
cyclist, long distance cycling.
Yeah,
And
and
guess what? It interfered not one bit with it.
yeah. Well, I've had some folks. You say that, but I've had some folks who say, Jim, are you promoting a really bad habit or a really
Yeah.
bad? And I don't want to, Ed. We don't need to argue about it, or we don't need to talk about it too much. I want to tell the listener, if you're thinking that, you're like, I can't believe I sat through this. Here's an hour of my life I'm never going to get back. And am I going to turn Home Gadget Geeks into a cigar podcast? No.
No.
That's what we have the Cigar Authority for. Like, go listen, go over and listen to Cigar Authority. But I'm not gonna. If you don't want to do it, don't. If you want to, do. And it is one of those kinds of things. There's a lot worse, but it is one of those kinds of things that I am looking forward to for the next however long I'm left, enjoying it as a thing we do with friends and folks who enjoy that as well.
Yep.
I have certainly enjoyed it. And so if you're listening, you make your own decision. There's not trying to pimp anything or push anything or say you got to do this or you got to get into this. If you're not comfortable with it, don't do it. I didn't do it until I was 50. Like when I was in my late 40s. But and it's probably for me, I'm so crazy about these things. It's probably a good idea. I waited for me till I was the fact that I've smoked 4 this week. You're kind of like, okay, that's probably a little for me. That's a little more than I kind of wanted to do, maybe one every other week.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. I don't enjoy fishing, so I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really, I think I've found, especially with cigar smokers, they tend to be considerate, right? I mean, they're not out to interfere with anybody else's enjoyment of life or fresh air. They tend to go to specific places, smoke their cigars, and not interfere with everybody else's right to pursue whatever they wish.
Yeah. And let's just keep it that way. Like that's one of those, that's one of those kinds of things here in the community. One of the things I've always appreciated, and Ed, you've been listening, you've been in our community a while. I was kind of surprised when you first reached out to me, right?
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy the show. As I said to you, I was in tech for 34 years before I decided, okay, I've had enough. Although, I don't know where's Wieger this week.
Oh yeah, I just blew him off.
I'm more interesting, but
you are, to be honest. And Mike had family obligations. He pinged me on Wednesday and he was like, hey, do you think you could just talk to Ed? And I'm like, yeah, I think Ed and I can probably do a show.
But
so he took the night off.
On last week's show, he almost had me hooked on that iPhone 11. He was talking it up, but yeah, I've been an Android guy since forever, and I've been thinking, okay, maybe I should move over to an iPhone. The big impediments for me are I'm deeply embedded in Google Voice, just because I worked for mobile companies for years, right? So I would have to test multiple carriers. And it's so much easier for me to, okay, I'm just going to grab an AT&T SIM and plug it in here and my phone number doesn't change. All right, I got to go to Verizon now. And even recently I thought, I don't know if you've looked at Visible. It's Verizon's pay-as-you-go plan. $40 a month, all in. And I thought, all right, I got a coupon code. I'll spend $20. I'll get a SIM. And if it works for me.
Yeah.
Hard to beat. Yeah, they throttle it at about 5 megabits per second.
Oh, okay.
Which for some people, listen, if you're going from work to home and you're on Wi-Fi, that could be a perfectly workable solution for you. But for me, it just wasn't going to cut it. Then yesterday, I think it was yesterday, B&H Photo sends out an email and says, hey, if you pre-order the Pixel 4, we'll give you a $100 gift card. I said, all right, I'm in. So I got one of those on the way.
Yeah.
And the other tough thing, too, is if you're on Android, I'm using Podcast Addict. I subscribe to roughly 120 podcasts.
Oh, wow.
And I'm thinking, I can't go put all of those in again. I just... Who knows how much time I have left on this earth, Jim? So that was kind of the final decision was, I'm just not going to move my podcast.
No. Well, I think that you can export and the file, move it, and then pull it back. I get you.
I used to do that for a living. I'm not doing it for life now.
No. And one of in the chat room, Shadow PO, or maybe that's supposed to be people, says, how did you deal with the transition from IT? Just left one IT job for another, now only 5 minutes from home, thankfully. Any recommendations on getting out? Which is I don't know if I've ever kind of covered
Well,
this on my show, but as you've
listen,
transitioned out of it, how's that gone?
my biggest recommendation is make a lot of money. No, I mean, I
Yeah.
most recently, this goes back to 2017. I was at a medical technology company, a publicly traded company, VP of engineering, and I had teams in Lexington, Mass, San Francisco, right downtown, and Santa Cruz. And I
It's a
was,
great place.
it's a great place. I worked at a company whose headquarters was in Santa Barbara one time.
Oh,
But the thing is, if you're on the East Coast, really going out to California twice a month wears on you. And at some point, a private equity company came in to buy the company I was at. I said, okay, this is not going to end well, but let me give it a quarter and see how it goes.
yeah.
And I stayed a quarter, and the guy I went there to work for, well, he's gone already, right? So I went in to see my boss that didn't know me and said, yeah, I'm going to be leaving the company. And he said, I'm really sorry to hear that. Where are you going? I said, just to my house. And, so I intended to go back, right? But I think you were talking about commutes last week.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so all the jobs are in Boston now. Really, anything you'd want to work on, Boston, right? I'm
Mhm.
only 23 miles away. That would be over 3 hours a day of
Yeah.
commuting for me,
Yeah.
And so I look at jobs and say, yeah, I'm not going to take that. That's in Boston. Or I'd look at something and say, yeah, I don't want to work on that. After 6 months, I realized, guess what? I'm out of that business now. So I thought, what do I like to do? And I actually went and worked in the cigar shop retail for a while.
Hmm.
And they just opened the podcast studio 2 years ago. I said, all right, that looks like fun. I'll
Yeah.
go do that.
Yeah. I've contemplated it. Like I've enjoyed the cigars so much. I'm thinking, okay, maybe in the next decade I'll learn enough that I can, in kind of semi-retirement,
Right. Well,
kind of work in a store, open
what
my own store.
really happened is, I sort of felt guilty because now I'm not working.
Mm-hmm.
I painted every room in our house so my wife wouldn't yell at me. And then she said to me one day, can I ask you a question? I said, yeah. Are you ever going to get another job? I said, gee, I'm not really sure. She said, well, you at least have to cover the cost of your cigars. And
Yeah.
I thought, here's a great
Mm.
idea. I'll go work at the cigar shop. I'll get a discount.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Do you guys with the podcast, do you get reviewed? Do they send you review cigars to try and how does that work?
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe I need to get more into that space.
yeah, you do.
No, I
Well,
don't really want to review cigars. I
I,
just want to smoke them.
no, you don't,
No.
because as an example, I mentioned I'm a blind taste tester
Yeah.
for Cigar Journal magazine. So
Yeah.
last month, a bag of 13 cigars shows up, and okay, get us the reviews in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you don't get the same enjoyment out of it.
No.
And guess what? Some of them are not good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed last night, even though it was kind of like, okay, I got to get this cigar smoked.
it was an obligation at that
I
point.
couldn't look you in the eye and come on the program. You're like, hey, I sent you these really nice cigars, and they're still in the humidor. And it was really fun to know they had been sent by you, which is great. It's always fun to do that when somebody else gift them. Justin sent me some, and I will enjoy those too, as it'll be nice. This thought of they were a gift. I give so many of these away myself to my kids or to my coworkers, right, when we do this. So to get them from somebody else is pretty great. And then just to sit on the deck for 2.5 hours in the dark. I built this deck, especially. It's funny, when I was building it, I didn't know I was going to do this, but I built this deck particularly to sit out in the evening and enjoy the night sky, and why not with a cigar?
Yeah.
And so that's worked out pretty well. And then technology wise, I talked to Justin because I was thanking him. I'd got the box and I'd got the rum from him. And I said, I was just saying thanks, and we had this conversation and snapped some pictures, and I got a picture of me smoking the cigar with him, and he's like, "Oh, I hate you," because he was at work. So just even virtually fun to do it that way.
See, that's part of the reason I work in that studio. How many places can you smoke at work anymore?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
do they have
that's a
air
big thing.
filtration systems for in there as well?
Oh, very
and that's
good.
another bit of tech. Maybe we'll save it for another show, but that's another bit of tech, right? Is an HVAC that removes all the smoke, right?
Yeah, actually, that's what we downsized our house, and that's what I miss most about the last house. We built it. I had my custom built cigar room, and it was over the 3-car garage, so 625 square feet. And I put in separate HVAC for that room, right? So it was actually pulling fresh air in and recirculating air. So it worked out well. Now I can't smoke at home, so I had to get a job where I could smoke.
Did the buyers, when they bought it, did they know what they were getting there? That it had been a smoke room?
They did.
Okay.
I didn't make a secret of it, but yeah, I mean, the reality is if you're smoking in the room all the time, you're going to have to repaint everything. Yeah. No doubt.
Well, but I was watching a YouTube video, and we'll wrap it here in just a second, but I was watching a YouTube video, and the guy painted it like a jet black, the walls like a jet black, and he had really dark furniture, and it looked pretty good.
Yeah, leather furniture, no carpets, no drapes.
Yeah.
My walls were painted, to start with, kind of nicotine stain. It was sort of a light, warm brown color that wouldn't suffer too much.
Yeah. Well, Ed, thank you for
it's been fun, Jim.
Reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, have you thought about talking about this?" And while it's not necessarily super tech heavy, I think there's a lot of tech, and it's my show and I can do whatever I want, to be honest.
That's how I appealed to you. I noticed you just talked about drinking one day.
We did. And we don't do it all the time.
No.
Next week, we've got the guys coming from Nextcloud, and it will be very techy in that point. But I think actually the one you said was the barbecue. You were like, "Hey, you guys talk about grilling all the time. Yeah. Could we do a cigar one?" And I think we should maybe think about doing this every 6 months or so, whenever it comes up. And
we'll see if everyone hated it first, Jim.
Oh, there's always I think
there's always haters.
There's always
gonna hate, but I actually produce a barbecue show too, so that one's a lot of fun.
Well, we may need you to come. Mike Howard, who is doing that show, got really sick, and he's doing better now. He has really bad cancer. And so he's been going, he's been doing the whole, not chemo, but he's been taking all the poison to kill it. And so I need to check in with him, but certainly he has not been feeling well. And so now that I know that, and I know you got a great microphone, we may need you to fill
barbecue. I know that you love a guest that comes in with real equipment, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I produce so many, and I had one, it was on Pit Life Barbecue. He joined in his car. I said, "Oh, this isn't going to go well." Then he decided he was going to start driving during the podcast. So
yikes, dude! Check your schedule. Check your schedule. If it's so tight that you got to drive during a podcast,
well, it depends on the guests you're getting too, right? A lot just don't know tech at all.
True. No, that's very true. Very true. Tony said in the chat room, "I don't even smoke, and I like the show." So we got one. We've got one thumbs up. Hopefully.
As long as one person likes me, I'm good.
Well, I like you, Ed. So
right.
You're good.
We got two now.
You're good.
Now, Wieger, we don't even know.
No, he's a little sketchy. I'm just going to be honest. That guy gets in and out of things faster than anybody I know.
He's an attorney, right?
He is.
All right. Enough said.
Strike number one. Strike number one. Well, Ed, thanks again. Hang tight here. We'll do a little bit of post-show, but a couple reminders as folks, as we think about wrapping this up. If you want to financially support the show, you can do it in really one of two ways. Patreon's the easiest, theaverageguy.tv/Patreon, or you can send me cigars. That works out too. Actually, if you got a favorite they're pretty light and they don't cost that much to ship. If you got one, you want to send it and I'll review it for you, like I did with Ed's, and I'm going to do with Justin's coming up and some others that we've done. I think Joe sent me, Joski sent me one as well. You're welcome to send them. Just email me, jim@theaverageguy.tv. I'll give you my address. It's a lot of fun. Likewise, if you want some recommendations or you just want to chat about it, let me know. I love to talk about it. And now we know Ed as well. And so we can get some good recommendations on that as well. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the show, or not download the show player. If you want to get it, I think Tony did that tonight. HomeGadgetGeeks.com, free for Android and iPhone. You can do that. I think our Patreon subscribers they help me pay the $200 a year to keep those apps running. And actually, it's a steal at $200 on Spreaker, because they do all the hard work and it just works for me, just to be 100% honest. So you can get that HomeGadgetGeeks.com. We are live. Oh, one more thing. Don't forget, Maple Grove Partners. If you need any kind of hosting, fast, reliable, from people that you know and you trust, Christian, of course, is behind that. And I know I need to get him on a Cyber Frontiers. It's coming. MapleGrovePartners.com. Plans start as little as $10 a month, and a couple of you have jumped on there, and I just get great reviews, and I really appreciate Christian and his sponsorship of the show as well. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at the ArchGuy.tv live. Still have HelloFresh. Got a whole new HelloFresh coupon list for you, so if you want to try a week for free, I don't make any money off it. I don't want to make any money off it. I just want you to have great, delicious food. Let me know, jim@theaverageguy.tv, and I will ship you a code. We'll be back. Stay, if you're listening live, stay for the post show. With that, we'll say goodnight, everybody.